Picture this. You're sitting in your doctor's office, trusting the man in the white coat. You're raising your children, believing your government protects them. You're voting, convinced your voice matters. But what if I told you that for over 70 years, your own government has been running secret experiments on you, your family, and your neighbors? What if the most horrifying conspiracy theories turned out to be documented fact? Today, we're diving into 5 government cover-ups so dark, so twisted, that when they were finally exposed, even hardened politicians wept in congressional hearings. These aren't theories. These are declassified documents, sworn testimonies, and smoking gun evidence of a shadow government that viewed American citizens as expendable lab rats. Buckle up. The truth is about to shatter everything you thought you knew about the land of the free. The year is 1945. Nazi Germany has fallen. The world celebrates the end of history's most evil regime. But behind closed doors in Washington, something unspeakable is happening. American officials are secretly smuggling Nazi war criminals into the United States, giving them new identities and putting them to work in our most sensitive government programs. Operation Paperclip wasn't just about recruiting a few rocket scientists. It was about importing 1,600 Nazi researchers, doctors, and engineers who had conducted horrific experiments on concentration camp prisoners. These weren't reformed scientists seeking redemption. These were war criminals with blood on their hands, now working in American laboratories. Meet Wernher von Braun, the father of America's space program. Hollywood made him a hero. NASA celebrated him as a visionary. But here's the shocking truth. Von Braun built his V-2 rockets using 20,000 slave laborers from concentration camps. When workers collapsed from exhaustion, they were beaten to death and replaced. Von Braun personally selected prisoners for his factory, knowing full well they would die. Did the American government care? Not one bit. They gave him a mansion in Alabama, a fat government salary, and unlimited resources to continue his work. The man who murdered thousands with slave labor became the architect of the Apollo moon missions. But von Braun wasn't alone. Dr. Hubertus Strughold, now called the father of space medicine, had conducted high-altitude experiments on prisoners, watching them die in agony as their lungs collapsed. Dr. Kurt Blome had weaponized plague and cholera for biological warfare. These monsters weren't imprisoned. They were promoted. The government's lie? They claimed these men were thoroughly denazified and posed no threat. Internal documents, declassified decades later, tell a different story. FBI memos describe these recruits as ardent Nazis and potential security threats. But the cover-up machine was already in motion. Imagine walking into a government clinic, trusting doctors who smile and promise to help you. You're told you have bad blood, a vague condition that requires free treatment. You're grateful. You bring your friends. You trust the system. What you don't know is that you're about to become part of the longest-running medical experiment in American history, and you're not the patient. You're the lab rat. From 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service conducted a study that would make Nazi doctors proud. They recruited 399 black men in rural Alabama who had untreated syphilis but never told them they had the disease. Instead, doctors lied to their faces, claiming they were receiving free health care for bad blood. Here's where it gets truly evil. In 1943, penicillin was discovered as a cure for syphilis. Did the government doctors treat these men? Absolutely not. They actively prevented treatment, bribing local doctors and pharmacies to deny penicillin to study participants. They needed to watch the disease progress. They needed to see these men die. For 40 years, government doctors sat in medical conferences, presenting papers on the untreated syphilis in the Negro male, while their test subjects went blind, insane, and died in agony. The doctors didn't just watch, they celebrated. Internal memos describe autopsy parties where researchers gathered to examine the organs of their victims. But the horror didn't stop with the 399 original subjects. Their wives contracted syphilis and died. Their children were born with congenital syphilis, suffering lifelong disabilities. The government knew this would happen. They counted on it. More test subjects meant better data. When the story finally broke in 1972, America was shocked. Congressional hearings revealed the stunning scope of the deception. One doctor testified that he had personally prevented treatment for hundreds of men, knowing they would die as a result. Not a single researcher expressed remorse. What if I told you that for 20 years, the CIA ran a program that made your neighborhood bartender, your family doctor, and your local psychiatrist into unwitting government agents, dosing random Americans with mind-altering drugs? What if the man sitting next to you at lunch yesterday was secretly a CIA operative, slipping LSD into your coffee to see what would happen? Welcome to MK Ultra, the CIA's $10 million mind control program that turned American citizens into human guinea pigs. From 1953 to 1973, CIA agents conducted illegal experiments on tens of thousands of people who never knew they were test subjects. Picture this nightmare. You're having drinks at a San Francisco bar. The bartender, actually a CIA operative, spikes your whiskey with LSD. You stumble home, hallucinating, terrified, convinced you're losing your mind. CIA agents follow you, taking notes on your behavior. If you end up in the hospital or kill yourself, well, that's just data for the program. This wasn't science fiction. This was standard operating procedure. CIA agents dosed strangers in restaurants, subway stations, and beach resorts. They hired prostitutes to slip drugs to their clients while hidden cameras recorded everything. They turned psychiatric hospitals into torture chambers, subjecting patients to weeks of drug-induced comas and electroshock therapy. But here's the most chilling part. The victims were often the most vulnerable members of society. Mental patients who couldn't consent, prison inmates who had no choice, drug addicts who were promised free drugs. The CIA specifically targeted people who wouldn't be believed if they tried to report what happened. Dr. Ewan Cameron, a respected psychiatrist at Montreal's Allen Memorial Institute, received CIA funding to conduct psychic driving experiments. He would put patients into drug-induced comas for weeks, then blast them with repeated audio messages thousands of times. The goal? To erase their personalities completely and rebuild them from scratch. One patient, Linda McDonald, entered the hospital for minor depression. She emerged months later unable to recognize her husband or children, unable to read or write, with the mind of a 3-year-old. The CIA had literally erased her identity. In 1973, facing congressional investigation, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MK Ultra files. 20,000 boxes of evidence were shredded and burned. We only know what we know because a few files survived by accident. The true scope of the program remains hidden forever. The atomic age promised a bright future. Nuclear power would light our cities. Atomic medicine would cure cancer. The government assured Americans that radiation was safe, controlled, beneficial. But behind the smiling scientists and cheerful propaganda films, something monstrous was happening. The same government that promised atomic prosperity was secretly feeding radioactive materials to children, injecting plutonium into hospital patients, and using American citizens as human measuring devices for atomic weapons. From 1944 to 1974, government agencies conducted over 4,000 secret radiation experiments on unsuspecting Americans. The victims? The most vulnerable people in society: disabled children, terminal patients, pregnant women, and the elderly. At the Fernald School in Massachusetts, researchers told parents their mentally disabled children would join a science club with special privileges. What they didn't mention was that the special breakfast included radioactive iron and calcium. For years, these children unknowingly consumed radioactive oatmeal while researchers measured how much radiation their bodies absorbed. The children trusted the adults. They looked forward to their special meals. They had no idea they were being poisoned by the very people who promised to care for them. But it gets worse. At the University of Rochester, Dr. Harold Hodge, ironically a member of the committee setting radiation safety standards, was secretly injecting hospital patients with plutonium. 18 patients received doses of the most toxic substance known to humanity. They were told they were receiving a new treatment. In reality, they were human radiation detectors, walking experiments to measure how atomic bomb fallout would affect the human body. These weren't terminal patients who volunteered for experimental treatment. Many were expected to recover. Elmer Allen, a railroad porter, was injected with plutonium during routine leg surgery. He lived for years afterward, never knowing he carried atomic poison in his bones. At Vanderbilt University, researchers convinced 829 pregnant women to drink vitamin cocktails that actually contained radioactive iron. The women thought they were improving their baby's health. Instead, they were exposing their unborn children to radiation doses 30 times higher than safety limits. Government researchers then tracked these children for decades, monitoring cancer rates and birth defects like scientists studying lab specimens. The most horrifying aspect? Government officials knew these experiments were criminal. Internal memos from the 1940s show researchers worried about adverse publicity if their radiation experiments became public. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but they did it anyway. What if I told you that for 15 years, the FBI waged a secret war against American citizens that included assassination, blackmail, burglary, and psychological torture? What if the same agency sworn to protect you had agents whose full-time job was to destroy the lives of Americans exercising their constitutional rights? From 1956 to 1971, the FBI's counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, conducted domestic terrorism on a scale that would make authoritarian regimes jealous. This wasn't just surveillance. This was active warfare against American citizens, with the explicit goal of neutralizing anyone the FBI deemed a threat. The primary target? Civil rights leaders, especially Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. FBI agents, didn't just spy on King. They tried to drive him to suicide. They sent him anonymous letters calling him a fraud and evil, along with recordings of his alleged extramarital affairs. The letter, written in the voice of a black person, concluded with this chilling threat. King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You are done. There is but one way out for you. This wasn't a rogue operation. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover personally approved every detail. Internal memos released decades later show Hoover's obsession with destroying King. One memo states the goal was to prevent the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. But King wasn't the only target. The FBI systematically infiltrated and destroyed hundreds of political organizations. They created fake letters to start conflicts between civil rights groups. They planted provocateurs to encourage violence, then used that violence to justify crackdowns. They burglarized homes and offices, planted evidence, and framed innocent people for crimes they didn't commit. The Black Panther Party faced the worst of COINTELPRO's wrath. FBI agents didn't just infiltrate the organization, they turned members against each other through forged letters and fake intelligence. In 1969, Chicago police, acting on FBI intelligence, conducted a pre-dawn raid on Black Panther leader Fred Hampton's apartment. They fired 90 shots into the apartment, killing the 21-year-old Hampton while he slept in his bed. Ballistics evidence showed the Panthers fired only one shot in return. The raid wasn't a shootout, it was an execution. FBI agents had drugged Hampton's drink earlier that evening to ensure he wouldn't wake up. They provided police with detailed floor plans of the apartment, marking exactly where Hampton would be sleeping. This wasn't law enforcement. This was assassination. The scope was staggering. Over 500,000 Americans were placed under FBI surveillance. The agency opened files on civil rights workers, anti-war protesters, feminists, and anyone who dared criticize government policies. They didn't just collect information, they used it as a weapon. But here's the most chilling part. COINTELPRO only ended because activists broke into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania, and stole classified documents. Without that burglary, the program might still be running today. And who knows what programs replaced it that we haven't discovered yet. These 5 programs represent just the tip of the iceberg, the operations we know about because documents survived or whistleblowers came forward. How many other programs remain hidden in classified files? How many are operating right now? The pattern is always the same. Government officials lie to Congress, destroy evidence, and claim national security when caught. The victims, ordinary Americans who trusted their government, are left to suffer while the architects of these programs retire with full pensions and presidential medals. Today, we live in an age of mass surveillance, secret courts, and classified budgets. The technology is more sophisticated, but the mindset remains unchanged. Your government still views you as a potential threat, still runs secret programs, still lies about what it's doing in your name. So the next time a government official looks into a camera and assures you they're protecting your rights, remember Operation Paperclip, Tuskegee, MK-Ultra, the radiation experiments, and COINTELPRO. Remember that your government has spent decades poisoning, drugging, experimenting on, and assassinating its own citizens. The only question is, what are they hiding from us today? And more importantly, what are you willing to do to find out? What shocked you most about these cover-ups? Do you think similar programs are running today? Let us know in the comments below if you're not afraid the government is watching.